Bava Kamma Daf Chof Amud Bet, how wisdom flows, tשמש. We have the most amazing story in the Gemara today, very difficult. It's an anecdote that we have to understand, but from that anecdote we get a transformational understanding of how wisdom flows and how wisdom doesn't flow. The story helps us understand how to expand your mind. You need to engage with things that are uncomfortable. If you only engage with ideas that are comfortable to you, your mind's not expanding. You're just getting confirmation of what you already know, what you already think. It's only when you're challenged, when your assumptions are being challenged, when your paradigms of thought are being challenged, and you engage with that challenge, whether you land up expanding your mind or not. The fact is your mind expands whether or not you accept this new idea that you've been exposed to. But the need to engage with ideas that are not necessarily comfortable to you is one of the requirements of expanding your mind altogether, of developing it as a person. And we get to understand that more clearly in the Gemara. The Gemara tells us of a story. Rav Chisda, who was the Gadol Hador, gives a Matmonim shir in the morning. And he notices somebody's missing. Who's missing? His son-in-law, Rabbi Bar Kamma. So he sees Rabbi Bar Kamma later in the day. He says, Rabbi Bar Kamma, lo havies gaban be'urta betchume. Did you miss a shir this morning? I asked such a powerful question, and you weren't there. So Rabbi Bar Kamma says, okay, so I'll listen to it online. I'll watch it on YouTube later on. Rav Chisda says, my boy, you don't get it. You listen to it later on, you get information. That's not what happened in the Beis HaMedrash. What happened in the Beis HaMedrash, there was an explosion today. An intellectual explosion of thinking and ideas that transformed people, that got people to think altogether differently. And you weren't there to participate. You can't just get the information. Wisdom is about process. It's about being part of the emergence of the ideas. It's not just getting the bottom line. You can't watch it on YouTube afterwards, Rabbi Bar Kamma. Oh, this is Rabbi Bar Kamma, really? Well, at least I've got a bit of an in with the Rosh Yeshiva. My father-in-law said, you mind telling me what in fact was this amazing question that you asked? He says, what we asked was about if a man is looking for a place to stay, and he's thinking of renting an Airbnb. But before he does that, he goes to his friend's house to see maybe his friend is there and he can stay with his friend. He comes to his friend's house. His friend is not there. The house is empty, but the door is open. So he goes inside and he sleeps in his friend's house. He saves the rental of the Airbnb. Does he have to pay the friend money or not? That's the question we talked about in the shir, and you weren't there this morning, as we explored the ethics and the legalities of this situation. Amalei says Rabbi Bar Kamma to Rav Chisda, the Gadol Hador, his father-in-law, the Rosh Yeshiva. Rav Chisda, mas nisin hi. That's a Mishnah. What do you mean you had such an amazing event in the Beis HaMedrash and I wasn't there? If I was there, I would have told you. It's a Mishnah. It's obvious. You don't have to explore such a thing. So he says to him, hey, mas nisin, says Rav Chisda, really? What Mishnah? Amalei says Rabbi Bar Kamma to Rav Chisda, tשמש לי. If I just tell it to you, he says, that'll just be information and you won't be part of the process. And for this to be a bit of a process for you, father-in-law, you need to do something for me, serve me, and then I'll teach it to you. Shokal Sudrei Korachle, so he took Rabbi Bar Kamma's talis and he folded it up for him, put it away in the talis bag. Amalei, so he said to him, then Rabbi Bar Kamma tells him the Mishnah, which is from our Gemara in Bava Kamma. And the Gemara discusses, so why did Rav Chisda not think that was a good comparison to learn it from the Mishnah? And there's a discussion about that, but that's the story. So there are two issues. There's a technical issue and there's a conceptual issue. The technical issue is, Rabbi Akiva Eiger asks it in the Gilui Nashas on the side of the Gemara, and that is, Rav Chisda is a Kohen. You're not allowed to make use of a Kohen for your personal benefit. How could Rabbi Bar Kamma? He's father-in-law, he's the Gadol Hador, and he's a Kohen, and you ask him to do something for you, to fold your talis. How can you do such a thing? The Hagos Maimonides says that you're not allowed to use a Kohen doesn't mean you're not allowed to use a Kohen. It's just that if you take him as a slave, you can't pierce his ear because that would be a mum. But you can hire him, you can work with him. The Smag goes further. The Smag is Baal Tosfos Rav Moshe Mikotzi from the 13th century, a Talmud of Rabbeinu Tam. So this is the Smag answers it differently, and he says Bischar mutar lishtabed bo. It's only as a slave. You can't use a Kohen for personal benefit, but you may hire him. So you can't say to the Kohen, fold my talus, or would you mind washing my car? But if he's a car washer owner, you can take your car there and the Kohen can wash your car and you pay him for it. There's nothing wrong with paying him, says the Smag. The Mishnah Melech says, so what about our Gemara here? He didn't pay Rav Chisda. Rabbi Bar Kamma asked him to do a job. He didn't pay him. Says the Mishnah Melech, yes, he did pay him. He paid him by explaining the Mishnah that Rav Chisda had missed. For Rav Chisda, that's worth more than any money in the world. To get clarity on something that he was struggling with is worth anything. So he's very happy to fold his son-in-law's talus because he's getting such a reward, he's getting such payment for it. So that's the technical side of the issue. But the more interesting side or the equally interesting side of the issue is just what was this all about? Is Rabbi Bar Kamma playing games? So I understand Rav Chisda's upset with Rabbi Bar Kamma, he wasn't in the shir. And yes, it's not the same just to get it secondhand afterwards. He's got to try and find out, he's got to be part of the process. So Rabbi Bar Kamma then gives him the answer, and Rav Chisda, before Rabbi Bar Kamma gives him the answer, he asks his father-in-law to do something for him. What is it about? Why do so? So there's a beautiful Hakdama to Shari Yosher. Shimon Shkop wrote an essay which he uses as the opening of his Sefer, the Shari Yosher, the Sefer which we've quoted from before and will do during Seder Nezikin, where Shimon Shkop explores uncertainty and how in Halacha we manage uncertainty with Rov and with Chazaka. He deals with Sfeikot. And in this beautiful, magnificent essay, which is a work in its own right, it's a Mussar Sefer, it's a philosophy Sefer, everybody should learn it. And he deals with amazing issues, the definition of ego and how to expand the sense of I, who we are as an individual, and how you can expand that and what that means in terms of Kedoshim Tiyu, how there's such Kedusha as you expand your sense of I, your sense of identity, as you're able to expand it further and further, what that means and how you're able to use it. And then he goes into a whole discussion on the difference between the first luchot and the second luchot, and why Moshe Rabbeinu broke the first luchot in favor of the second luchot. And then he comes into the third section, where he says about my sefer, he says, "V'hinei eda shesifri ze lo yeh mekubal lakol." I realize my sefer, this Shari Yosher, not everybody's going to love it. Because there are lots of learners who don't know how to learn. That's basically what he's saying. He says it very politely. They have a different derech. They learn Daf Yomi, they learn Pshat, but they don't go into things really deeply. And my sefer is about going into things really deeply. And there are many ways of learning, and that's fine. Not everybody has to learn it. It's fine. If it's not for you, leave it alone. Don't learn it. ועוד לזה שרוב העניינים המתבהרים בו הם עניינים הדרושים עיון ויגיעה. But I'm telling you up front that most of the issues I'm going to raise in my Sefer need deep thought and unbelievable toil. In the previous section, Reb Shimon explained that toil is one of the conditions for understanding Torah. It's one of the memches dvorim Torah niknes b'hem, one of the 48 characteristics that Torah is acquired. You can't understand, you can't grasp the Torah if you haven't really applied your mind. If you haven't broken out into a sweat while you're learning, you haven't got it yet. You're not there yet. And these matters of Torah can't be grasped by a brief glance, by looking at it. ולא כל אדם רוצה לתלות החיסרון בעצמו מחמת עומק המושג וחיסרון המשיג. And most people, when they look at something and they can't understand it, they're not willing to say, it's because I don't have the knowledge base or I don't have the intelligence to understand it. What do? You look at something you don't understand, you say, it's nonsense. You're mevatel it. That's what we tend to do instead of saying, well, I don't understand it. Clearly, I'm just not up to it. I'm just not there yet. And it's interesting today with all the Sifrei Ezer, all these anthologies that are created to make learning easier. And that's why I say so often that such wonderful things are happening in the world of Torah, in that everybody's learning and people are accessing Shas, and it's a wonderful, wonderful things. But learning, this kind of learning that he's talking about, you don't have. You look up at the art scroll and you see, and he brings this one, and he brings that one, and you glance and you see, and That's not learning. That's not what learning is, Rabbi Shimon says. You've got to apply your mind and work on it and unravel it and reconstruct it and so on. And then he goes on to say, he brings our Gemara. And he says, what is this about? Why does Rami Bar Kamma ask his father-in-law to fold his talis? שהעניין הוא שבדבר שצריך עיון והגייה תלוי עיקר הדבר אם המתלמד מאמין במעלת המלמדו. Unbelievable concept in Torah. The success of learning something in depth and applying your mind to it depends on the esteem with which you hold the author or the teacher. That's going to determine the difference. As im lo yavin barishona, if you believe that the author or the teacher is somebody of value, who's learned, who's a Talmid Chacham, who spent a lot of time figuring it out, if you believe all of that, yitleh chisaron ba'atzmo. If you don't get it, you'll say, I'm not up to it, I didn't get it, I have to work on it harder, I have to apply myself some more, I didn't get it. V'yosif ometz liga et atzmo. So you'll do a chazorah, you'll go over it again. You come out of a Matmonim shir and you feel you didn't fully get it. You'll go home, you'll take the Makoros, you'll go open up the Makoros, you'll work on it again, you'll find your own chidushim, your own derech in it, you'll develop process as a result of it. But if you don't, then you'll just say, okay, so I didn't understand today's, well, tomorrow's. But as yavin b'achrona, and if you really apply yourself, you'll eventually understand it, you'll eventually get it. Aval im divrei hamelamdo kalim be'inav. But if he thinks the teacher's a cheder teacher, I can get it anywhere. There are lots of shirim on the daf. If I'm not on this shir, I'll be at another shir. It doesn't make a difference. It's all okay. We can have 6 shirim going simultaneously. I can try each one. This one, I understand that. You just go where it's easiest to go. V'lo shaveh lo lit'ametz la'amol b'hem. You don't choose a derech and apply yourself to acquiring the derech and to understanding it fully. So then if you don't get it, you'll say, so I didn't get it. I didn't get the shir today, so what? No big deal. But if you really believe you're learning a piece of Reb Shimon and you know who Reb Shimon Shkop is and you don't understand what Reb Shimon is saying, you won't go to sleep tonight until you know what Reb Shimon is saying. That's a different approach if you really believe in the value and the authority of the mechaber, of the author, of the teacher that you're learning from. And so Rami Bar Kamma knew it. This comparison of the case of the Airbnb to the case of a behemoth, of an animal eating somebody else's meal in the middle of Rishus HaRabim, is such a fine idea that he wanted to make. He didn't want to teach this to Rav Chisda, his father-in-law, until he believed that his father-in-law was craving. And look at that next word, lehit lamed. Now that word is hitzpayel. It doesn't say lilmod, it doesn't say to learn. Lehit lamed. Reb Shimon is almost creating a word. I don't know if it exists in the Hebrew. Lehit lamed. Where do you see such a word? What does it mean? Sometimes one of the things I'm upset about with the way we learn nowadays is that you don't have a sense of the community of lomdim who are learning with you. You know each other, and that's very nice, but there are hundreds of other people who learn. I'm talking about people who learn every day and apply their minds to it, and the people who are learning online also don't know the community, and we'll try and do something about that sometime. But one of the amazing people, I told you about one Talmid Chacham in the United States who told me that on the days he doesn't listen to the Matmonim, he discovered it's on the days he doesn't want to be moved out of his comfort zone. That's the same idea we're talking about here. He doesn't want to be challenged. He doesn't want to have to think that much. He's noticed those are the days he doesn't do it. A big Talmid Chacham in New York. There's another amazing Talmid Chacham in New York who listens to every Matmonim and goes over the Makoros and sometimes makes wonderful remarks He'arot on the Facebook page, or he sends me comments. Unbelievable. He's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And he wrote a translation of this Hakdama, of this introduction of Shimon Shkop, and he called it Widen Your Tent. Is the name of the book of his translation. And I've put the footnote at the bottom, which I very seldom do. He comments on this word lehit lamed. Lehit lamed means to transform yourself through the learning process. Lilmod is to learn an art scroll. Lilmod is to sit passively in a shir and listen to the shir. Lehit lamed is to transform yourself through the learning process. And Rabbi Bar Kamma wanted to be sure that Rav Chisda was willing to transform himself through this moment of learning from Rabbi Bar Kamma. And the way to do that is to say, so I want to put you in a situation where just for one moment you serve me. If you're willing in front of everybody to fold my talus, that means you value me as a source of Torah. That means you value me as a Talmid Chochem, and you will apply your mind to what I'm going to say. You won't just dismiss it as some vort from your son-in-law. You'll realize that this is important. So if you want to hear, that's fine, do something. Explains Reb Shimon Shkop. That's what this is all about. It describes the flow of wisdom. Wisdom flows, it's energetic. It's not information. You can't just pick it up by reading. It flows. It's an energy that one person passes on to another. That's why it's called Besoiro. That's why Moshe kibel Torah misinai u'misarua liYoshua. It doesn't say valimda liYoshua. It doesn't say he taught Yoshua. Misarua, he passed the energy, he transferred the energy. The transference of wisdom, especially Torah, is the transference of energy from Rebbe to Talmud through the generations over and over again. That's what this is about. And when a Talmud is willing to be mitlamed, if a Talmud comes to a shir, it's fine, it comes to a shir. But if a Talmud wants to be mitlamed, a Talmud wants to transform his way of seeing the world through the Torah he's learning, that's a different level of Talmud. And therefore he says, I just ask of you, when you learn the Sefer, just apply yourself to it. And he goes on with some other beautiful ideas which I've included here so that people can learn these sections of the Hakdama. And that's suggested in a way also by the Vilna Gaon in his opening phrases of Sefer Mishle, where the book of Mishle starts off with the words Shlomo ben David. These are Eile Mishle. It's Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael. Ask the Vilna Gaon. We know that who the author is. It says on the back of the book who the author is. Do you have to start your book and say, I am so and so, the son of so and so, and give me your job title as well, Melech Yisrael? Says the Vilna Gaon. Ki halomed besefer tzarich leda mihu hamechabro. If you're learning from a sefer, or you're listening to a shir, you need to know who the Maggid Shir is. You need to know who the Mechaber is. Ki im yeh mechaber gadol b'chokhmah v'chein b'yirah v'chein b'torah. Because if the author is great in wisdom, in Yirah Shamayim, and in Torah, bevadai yeh b'sifro chokhmot gedolot. You can be sure that in his sefer there will be incredible chokhmah. And if you read his sefer and you're not discovering the chokhmah, work on it a little harder, because you know it's there. If it's dumb, you're reading. That's why we've got limited time. So read things that you know are worthwhile reading. The same, you go online and you're reading an article, you're picking up a newspaper, you're reading an article. Choose who you read. Are you willing to invest the time? Is it worth your while? Are you going to expand your mind, or are you just picking up information? If you're going to expand your mind, you're going to have to invest energy. If you're going to invest energy, you want to know that at the end of it there's wisdom. You don't want to invest energy and come to the end of it and say, it was nothing. So how do you know there's wisdom, says the Vilna Gaon? Check who the Mechaber is. If the Mechaber is somebody who's gadol b'chokhmah, v'chein b'yirah, v'chein b'torah, you can assume there's wisdom there, and you can apply your mind. As Reb Shimon explains, you can apply your full energy into understanding it, because you're going to discover wisdom. If you do so, then it's going to be worth your while. And that's the pshat in the Gemara in Tainist of Zion, where the Gemara says, Lama nimshulu divrei Torah l'mayim. Why is Torah compared to water? Because if water is flat, is on a level, it doesn't move, there's no energy. It's stagnant. And you know what happens to stagnant water. It's not very good. If you want water to flow, there has to be a slant. Water can only flow from a higher point to a lower point. Water can't flow if it's flat and stagnant. In the same way, the mitlamed, who he was willing to transform himself through the learning of Torah, has to put himself beneath the source of the Torah from which he's learning. The Sefer is learning from, the Shir is listening to, whatever it is that he's learning, he has to put himself below and assume that the Torah that he's learning has such wisdom in it that it's worth the effort. Otherwise, there's no flow. Yes, you can pick up the information, The wisdom of Torah flows like water. There has to be a high and a low. And it's not a permanent thing. Something Rami Bar Chama normally sits in Rav Chisda's shir. Normally Rami Bar Chama is low and Rav Chisda is high. For this moment, the seesaw switches. And he says, if you want the energy of the idea I'm going to share, it needs you to put yourself beneath me. And that might be hard for you, Rav Chisda. No, this is Rav Chisda. I'm happy to do it. What do you want me to do? He says, follow my talus. He follows his talus. It's fine. That's the humility of Rav Chisda. In order to gain insight, he's willing to put himself at a lower level so that the energy flows from above to below, because that's how Torah works. We need to know who our teachers are. We need to know who our Rosh Yeshivas are. We need to know how our Gedolei Yisrael are. We need to know who our Acharonim are. We need to know who our Rishonim are. You can't just, you see, sometimes the academics dismiss people and talk to them whether they're talking about a great Gadol or they're talking about some guy who's writing an article. They talk about him in the same way. They don't understand this idea that Torah is a source of energy that has to flow from something you elevate to something you subjugate. Elevate the source and subjugate yourself, and Torah flows. But the source has to be worth elevating. How do you know that? It says the Vilna Gaon. Check who the author is, check who the Mechaber is, check who the Maggid Shir is.